My name is Don Head. I will be your narrator for The Nature of the Physical World, Time. By Arthur Stanley Eddington, 1882–1944. Chapter 3, Time. Astronomer Royal's Time. I have sometimes thought it would be very entertaining to hear a discussion between the Astronomer Royal and, let us say, Professor Bergson on the nature of time. Professor Bergson's authority on the subject is well known, and I may remind you that the Astronomer Royal is entrusted with the duty of finding out time for our everyday use, so presumably, he has some idea of what he has to find. I must date the discussion some 20 years back before the spread of Einstein's ideas brought about a rapprochement. There would then probably have been a keen disagreement, and I rather think that the philosopher would have had the best of the verbal argument. After showing that the Astronomer Royal's idea of time was quite nonsensical, Professor Bergson would probably end the discussion by looking at his watch and rushing off to catch a train which was starting by the Astronomer Royal's time. Whatever may be time de jure, the Astronomer Royal's time is time de facto. His time permeates every corner of physics. It stands in no need of logical defense, it is in the much stronger position of a vested interest. It has been woven into the structure of the classical physical scheme. Time in physics means Astronomer Royal's time. You may be aware that it is revealed to us in Einstein's theory that time and space are mixed up in a rather strange way. This is a great stumbling block to the beginner. He is inclined to say, that is impossible. I feel it in my bones that time and space must be entirely different. They cannot possibly be mixed up. The Astronomer Royal complacently retorts, it is not impossible. I have mixed them up. Well, that settles it. If the Astronomer Royal has mixed them, then his mixture will be the groundwork of present-day physics. We have to distinguish two questions that are not necessarily identical. First, what is the true nature of time? Second, what is the nature of that quantity that has become a fundamental part of classical physics structure under the name of time? By long history of experiment and theory, the results of the physical investigation have been woven into a scheme which has, on the whole, proved wonderfully successful. Time, the Astronomer Royal's time, has its importance because it is a constituent of that scheme, the binding material or mortar of it. That importance is not lessened if it should prove to be only imperfectly representative of the time familiar to our consciousness. We, therefore, give priority to the second question. But I may add that Einstein's theory, having cleared up the second question, has found that physical time is incongruously mixed with space and can pass on to the first question. There is a quantity, unrecognized in pre-relativity physics, which more directly represents the time known to consciousness. This is called proper time or interval. It is separate from and unlike proper space. Your protest in the name of common sense against the mixing of time and space is a feeling I desire to encourage. Time and space ought to be separated. The current representation of the enduring world as a three-dimensional space leaping from instant to instant through time is an unsuccessful attempt to separate them. Come back with me into the virginal four-dimensional world, and we will carve it anew on a plan which keeps them entirely distinct. We can then resurrect the almost forgotten time of consciousness and find that it has gratifying importance in the absolute scheme of nature. First, let us understand why physical time has come to deviate from time as immediately perceived. We have jumped to certain conclusions about time and have come to regard them almost as axiomatic. However, they are not justified by anything in our immediate perception of time. Here is one of them. If two people meet twice, they must have lived the same time between the two meetings, even if one of them has traveled to a distant part of the universe and back in the interim. An absurdly impossible experiment, you will say. Quite so, it is outside all experience. Therefore, may I suggest that you are not appealing to your experience of time when you object to a theory which denies the above statement. And yet, if the question is pressed, most people would answer impatiently that, of course, the statement is true. They have formed a notion of time rolling outside us in a way that makes this seem inevitable. They do not ask themselves whether this conclusion is warranted by anything in their experience of time. Although we cannot try the experiment of sending a man to another part of the universe, we have enough scientific knowledge to compute the rates of atomic and other physical processes in a body at rest and a body traveling rapidly. We can say that the traveler's bodily processes occur more slowly than the man's corresponding processes at rest, i.e., more slowly according to the Astronomer Royal's time. This is not particularly mysterious. It is well known both from theory and experiment that the mass or inertia of matter increases when the velocity increases. The retardation is a natural consequence of the greater inertia. Thus, so far as bodily processes are concerned, the fast-moving traveler lives more slowly. His cycle of digestion and fatigue, the rate of muscular response to stimulus, the development of his body from youth to age, the material processes in his brain which must more or less keep step with the passage of thoughts and emotions, the watch which ticks in his waistcoat pocket, all these must be slowed down in the same ratio. If travel speed is very great, we may find that the traveler has aged 1 year while the stay-at-home individual has aged 70 years. He has only found appetite for 365 breakfasts, lunches, etc. His intellect, clogged by a slow-moving brain, has only traversed the amount of thought appropriate to 1 year of terrestrial life. His watch, which gives a more accurate and scientific reckoning, confirms this. Judging by the time which consciousness attempts to measure after its own rough fashion, and, I repeat, this is the only reckoning of time we have a right to expect to be distinct from space, the two men have not lived the same time between the two meetings. Reference to time as estimated by consciousness is complicated by the fact that the reckoning is very erratic. I'll tell you who time ambles withal, who time trots withal, who time gallops withal, and who he stands still withal. As You Like It, Act 3, Scene 2. Lois and Dorothy Head.